again, friends, and welcome to another episode of Culture Crossroads. I'm Andrew Southwick, and as always, thank you for being a part of the show wherever and however you are consuming the program. R.C. Williams, Julianna, Ormond, they're going to join us in the next segment, so stick with us here. To get this episode started, we're going to spend some time to better understand the tactics of the opposition. And really, that's going to be our focus for the whole program. We're going to tell you why in just a moment. Now, we know all the talking points. We know the general fears and concerns about the direction of America. And we know that the Democrat Party has been completely taken over by the spirit of the age. We know that the Republican Party, by contrast, is made up, for the most part, of spineless corporatists who parrot our talking points at every election cycle, but have no actual conviction or belief in what they are saying. They just want a seat at the power table, and if they have to pander to get our vote, well, that's what they have to do. Now, I'm confident that you are going to learn a thing or two from this episode, because I did in researching this episode. And these things we're going to learn today are going to help us as we continue to defend freedom and liberty in our respective communities. But first, I want to set the scene, all right? Now, the overthrowing of freedom and liberty in America has been a long march, many decades in the making. From the taking over of our public institutions to the subversion and the usurpation of our rights in broad daylight, those who wish to end America and establish their own vision of a top-down mandatory utopia are nothing if not persistent. Now, indeed, we've come a long way, perhaps much too far away, from a country that boasts that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, but among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now we carry slogans and signs calling for the endless and limitless murder of the unborn. We wear our banners heralding the tragically ironic Queers for Palestine, such things. We carry any and all manner of acronyms and focus grouped marketing phrases like Black Lives Matter or Antifa or 1619 Project, DEI, CRT, USAID, on and on and on, all designed, to erode any memory, any meaning of the founding history and life of America. Consider the words of John Adams. Here's just a few quotes. Liberty, according to my metaphysics, is a self-determining power in an intellectual agent. It implies thought and choice and power. Or how about, you'll never know how much it has cost my generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. Or lastly, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. In John Adams' America, and in the America of the Founding Fathers, we were a people of free and intellectual thought that sought to pursue the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, but the truth. In America, as it was founded, our rights came from God. Why? In order to safeguard us from a tyrannical government that would want to replace God. And, let's be honest with ourselves. In America, as it was founded, the freedom and liberty had to be constantly fought for and defended. And it's been a while since those of us who treasure this freedom have truly defended it. It's almost certain that somewhere along the way, we have traded inspiration for endless frustration. We've traded unity regarding America's national identity for a division regarding our individual preferred identities. We replaced a country built on courage for a country that seeks only comfort and comfort at any cost. And these trades were all sold to us by the progressive agenda and ideology that we are seeing in no uncertain terms today. Now, those progressives have come a long way to get this far, and they're not just going to give up because MAGA says so. For the burgeoning progressive utopian hive mind, an individual and free thought is the worst crime of all, because an individually free thought may happen upon the truth of any given circumstance. And since those who oppose freedom have built their storehouses of tyrannical power on lie after lie, they cannot for 1 second allow true freedom and liberty. So they must destroy all that freedom and liberty has birthed. They must erase it from all memory so that no one in the future might one day accidentally read a real history book and learn that living in a perpetual indentured servitude to an all-powerful government ruling system may not be the only way to live. But the godless progressive ideology marches on, being systematically presented in books like Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. You could even go so far back as to say that Charles Darwin's Origin of Species and Descent of Man publications were the first mainstream acceptances of this worldview, particularly in America. Even John Lennon, former Beatle, musician, legend in the music world, subscribed to this point of view, and he made it clear in his signature solo song, Imagine. Now I want to get this straight. I'm a huge Beatles fan. You might not find another fan of the Beatles bigger than me, and I do appreciate the musical genius of John Lennon. But if they were to have sporting events in hell, I promise you this song would be sung before every game as hell's national anthem. In the song, Lennon sings, "Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky." In one poetic sentence, gift-wrapped in an admittedly beautiful melody, Lennon has removed God from humanity and culture, and by removing God, he has also removed any purpose for life. Above us only sky. There's nothing to look forward to. We didn't come from anywhere, we don't belong anywhere, and we're not going anywhere. We have no purpose in our being, and therefore no real purpose in our continued being. This is part of the progressive mantra. You don't matter. We make you matter. Now Lennon continues, "Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Ah, yes, there's the no borders crowd right there. And no national sovereignties. There is nothing so valuable that it's worth defending your life. Forget casting your sacred honors and trusting your sacred honors with one another. It doesn't matter. Oh, and in case you missed it, the first time around, no God." Okay. Now Lennon's final verse says this, "Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine owning nothing and liking it." Where have I heard that before? Probably nowhere, right? See, here's the thing. This ideology, this worldview, is what the progressives are attempting to implement right now. But they have overlooked one obvious thing. In every verse, in every chorus of the song, John Lennon admits in his lyric that this utopia can only be imagined. Now, I don't know if Mr. Lennon knew why it could only be imagined, but one reason is that without a purpose for humanity given by God, that purpose must then come from government. And if government is handing out purpose to people, then the best we can do is try our hardest to be useful eaters to the government, not useless eaters. By the way, that phrase is not mine. The crowd at the World Economic Forum uses that quite a bit. Because throughout history, these people deemed useless to their governments, of course, they usually don't make it that long. Now, and this is not to mention that if we have no borders, if we cannot defend ourselves, well, whose way of life wins? What does that look like? It looks like Palestine flags in the streets of Los Angeles, perched on top of burning cars, a much different sight than perhaps Iwo Jima. Who will determine the culture then for the masses? Who gets to decide who we are as a people? If there is no hunger, for example, I'm not saying that hunger is a good thing, but who is in charge of rationing the food that can accomplish that feat? Who's the one passing out the seed and grain? As far as I have seen in the countries that have done that, starvation is rampant. It's a way of life. I could go on. So we need to ask ourselves, which direction are we going? Are we headed towards John Adams' America or John Lennon's America? Which, I suppose, without borders and without God anchoring its constitution, wouldn't be America at all. But then again, that is the progressive goal, isn't it? So what do we do? Matthew 10:16, Jesus tells his followers that he is sending them out as sheep amongst wolves, and that his followers must be wise or shrewd in some translations as serpents and as innocent as doves. Now, the innocent as doves parts we can understand. But what does it mean to be wise as serpents? Are we supposed to be cunning and deceptive? Are we supposed to get our ways by lying to people? Of course not. But we need to know how serpents operate so that we can best defend against their attacks, and so that our offense might be that much more potent. Or consider this, in Luke 14, Jesus talks about counting the cost of following him, and he uses a few different examples of what that means. Now, strictly speaking, Jesus is talking about the cost of being a Christian, following Jesus, but the principle can apply to many circumstances. For example, in the passage, Jesus talks about a king going to war and needing to know what kind of army he is facing, so that the king can bring enough soldiers and have the right weapons and know what kind of fight is being waged. Jesus says otherwise the king's going to come back embarrassed because he's going to get his lunch handed to him. Paraphrasing, of course. One of the problems that we have, and one of the problems that we have had in fighting for and preserving our freedoms and liberties here in America, is that we, the conservatives, engage too often in the wrong fights. We bring the wrong weapons to the wrong battles, and usually we don't have enough soldiers in the right places. Now, I'm not saying that the culture wars are not important. They are. In fact, many of the culture wars are the spiritual wars that we're fighting, the battles that pop up. Things like abolishing the evil practice of abortion. We must continue that fight. We need to end the intellectual kidnapping of our children through the confusing of their identities and gender. We need to maintain rights to our property so that we can have things like energy and food and so on. But if you're like me, you've often wondered, well, how it is that so many people seem to take the side of the bad guy and call it good. This is different from thinking Lex Luthor and Superman is a cool villain. This is literally taking the side of the bad guys. How can a state like California, for example, protest in the streets as they've been doing, albeit probably paid, but when the people they're protesting for are illegally here and hate this place in the first place? Why does it seem that in some states, convicted criminals get more second chances than the law-abiding citizen? Or even take the lighter side. Why does a company like Disney insist on putting out their woke and subversive programming when they know that their target audience and their most loyal and faithful audience doesn't want it and won't allow it in their homes to a great degree? I suggest to you that it's because we don't understand the real war that is being fought. We fight the battles that pop up, and again, that's not to diminish those battles, but the war is being fought, the real war is being fought on an entirely different front, with different weapons, and it's time we learn what those are. So when we come back, we're going to break down some of the most insidious tactics being used against us right now in real time for the express purpose of ending our way of life. And the hope is that the more we understand how they are attacking us, the better we can defend ourselves and our families, our communities, and the freedom and liberty that God has given this nation. This, friends, is how we win. We expose the opposition's playbook and lay out the blueprint for victory next in Culture Crossroads.
Home on the Range offers a nurturing place for teens who may have just come from an unsafe or traumatic environment. Here, they receive therapy and education services centered around animals, and the surrounding nature provides opportunities for work, fun, and healing. Life skills learned at Home on the Range are carried with residents when they return to the community with new talents and a greater appreciation for themselves and others.
And welcome back to Culture Crossroads. Joining us now, R.C. Williams and Julianna Ormond, Sherlock Market Research, Watchman Action. My friends, welcome back to the show. We're going to get into something called tracking versus triangulation. We're going to intro that in just a second. But first, you were listening to the monologue there in the first segment. Am I off base? Is that a good place for us to start our conversation as we look at what our opposition is actually using against us?
I applaud you for everything that you were talking about, Andrew. It takes a real man to stand up and say, we need to confront what's actually happening in front of us. So I love the fact that, we at Culture Crossroads are talking real truth, not what they want us to believe, not the propaganda, but the reality of what we're looking at, not what they want us to see.
Andrew, so I recognize that we're also dressed appropriately for the occasion based on your monologue. That's pretty important. What you said there took me back to something we saw the other night. We were actually watching an old episode of Anthony Bourdain's No Reservations, and he was in Cambodia, speaking of weird liberals. But he was telling the story, the people that lived there were telling the story of the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot and the March In and what they did. And interestingly enough, one of their primary functions in getting things done was erasing all history, as if it did not exist. So there was no source. All the intellectuals, all the doctors, all those people who worked in society in a meaningful way were all murdered, and they basically erased history, the history of Cambodia. Isn't it interesting that John Lennon's song Imagine really kind of puts you in that same place? But it just sounds good.
Yeah. It's a nice melody. We think it's all about peace, but that's not the way to peace. Well, let's get into what really is going on. What's the playbook of the opposition? What are the weapons they're really using here so we can be more effective? Now, we have talked on the show. We've done segments on the tracking of Americans. We've talked about how Trump commissioned Palantir to start tracking every American, and we broke that down. We've talked about Real ID. We've talked about all the different tech and emerging AI and so on and so forth. But there is a distinction between tracking and triangulation. We think of tracking as knowing where we are at all times, and that's true. But triangulation is more than that. It's knowing what we are going to do next. Explain.
Andrew, this entire thing, and Julianna speaks about this a lot, given her degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice in forensic psychology, is tracking you can think of as more passive, right? So you're kind of watching what you're doing, but triangulating is significantly more nefarious. So what happens is that not only are you being tracked, your behavior is being shaped, and they're triangulating or funneling you into the places that they want you to go or the things that they want you to do. This is why we've warned so many times on the show about getting pulled into tribalism, and if they're trying to run you into a brick wall or they want you to fight with your neighbor, they're going to triangulate. And that could come through the media, it could come through other people you follow, it could come through the things that you consume. They will figure out a way. Once they understand you better, which is why mobile devices and having things like Amazon Alexa in your home are so bad, once they figure you out and they get your habits down, they can begin to triangulate, and then they can begin to shape your behavior. Now, Cass Sunstein wrote a book called Nudge. And as we've often said, including on this show, is that they're not going to just shove you in a direction. Right. The way to do that effectively is to nudge you a little bit at a time so you don't realize it's happening.
So with Palantir now coming on board, he wants all of our information, centralized. So think about it, every time you're swiping your credit card, everywhere that you're driving, whatever you're saying on your phone. For example, I had a girlfriend over last night. I had just met her, brand new friends, right? As soon as I go onto Facebook this morning, my first, you may know request was her. And I'm like, well, they knew our phones were in the same room together last night because boop, there's a friend, a friend suggestion right there with her on it. So, if they know that kind of information about us, then they can start shaping our behavior. What information are they showing you? What are they not showing you? How are they showing it to you? What colors is it showing up as? People don't understand that your reality around you is being made up. It's being shaped. And that's where the triangulation comes in, because your whole matrix around you, they're shaping it.
Yeah. Andrew, I think the thing that you mentioned about John Adams and his statements are so important. And I've been on a lobby for John Adams for decades now about his importance in the history of the United States is important with regard to, are you willing to be vigilant and fight for it? So they get you into this place where they can nudge your behavior and get you angry enough at the fact that things aren't convenient or don't move fast enough, right? So they've got our impatience button at an all-time high, and the catharsis, the answer is well, look, just let us do it for you. It's more convenient if you have to think about those friends. It's like, because what really happens is if you're in the room with somebody and you forget their name, don't you want us to be able to remind you of that? And you say, sure, that sounds great. You know what? That sure is convenient. I think I like that. Next thing you know, you're being triangulated.
Is this, what you're describing kind of sounds to me like illusionists and magicians that give you the false idea of choice. You're making all these choices seemingly free, but you're coming to a predetermined end. And of course, we all say, whoa, that's amazing. And look, I like a good magician. I'm all for that. And I think it's amazing that mentalism stuff that's not really spiritual, but just suggestion. Is that like a picture of what triangulation is? We're getting the false illusion of choice, but they've got a predetermined destination for us?
Andrew, 100%. So one of the stories we wrote and ripped from the headlines, I think you already have it loaded up, is Big Brother is tracking you, right? And we had the proof because Cox Media Group, which owns a number of radio and TV stations throughout the US, they also have a strong billboard or outdoor division. They got caught in presentations to advertisers saying basically this: we have enough data on citizens, on everywhere they go, everything they do. We've successfully layered that data. Not only do we have a good idea of what they're going to do next, so you're going to land in exactly the right place at the right time. We're listening to conversations, we're monitoring all this behavior. We also know exactly what mood they're in. So look, here's the best way. Not only can we deliver you these people and get your message to them, but here's the best way to approach them at the best time to get the desired result. Now, Andrew, in all honesty, if you think about this, what better way for you as an advertiser to know? Let's say that you sell junk food. What better way to advertise than to say, I'm going to focus all my money into the times when people are most stressed to get them to buy more of my stuff. And now I don't have to guess when that is. I don't have to blanket advertise. I can hyper focus and get the maximum ROI for my dollars, right? It's the ultimate dream for an advertiser. But how dangerous is this, Andrew, that Cox, one, would do it, but two, would put it in a presentation like this and tout it, not thinking that someone was going to say, that sounds really Big Brother / 1984 to me.
Right.
This is triangulation. So they took the next logical step. They said, so look, now that we understand this, so we can do this for you, as they're consuming it, we're going to take that data and get even better at delivering your messages. This is that whole idea of predictive audience technology.
I want to get to something called the kill box concept and shift to that. Explain first what the kill box concept is.
Andrew, so the kill box concept is that if we wanted to put you in a 15-minute city, we'll get to that a bit later, or we wanted to get you in a particular place so that we could have the maximum effect or impact on your destruction. Big Pharma does this, Big Food does this. They get you these kill boxes. So what are they? They get something that tastes so sweet on the surface that you can't deny it. What they don't tell you is that there's just enough poison in that sweet to kill you. And so one of the most prime examples of this, Andrew, and this is something we've been tracking for 2 years now, is the growth of WorldCoin. So Sam Altman is the founder of ChatGPT, OpenAI. He came up with this idea in the summer of 2023 of WorldCoin. Now, the premise was this: to get crypto to people in third world or other developing nations so that they can participate in the process for income equality, universal basic income. Yeah, it sounds good to the average person on the surface. Here's the kicker. The way that you get your WorldCoin is there's a giant orb that comes up to you, or you walk up to it. It scans your iris. So it scans your eye, gets your biometric data, and then in exchange, you get your WorldCoin. Now, Andrew, as we mentioned, this launched in third world countries in 2023. We did a follow-up after that story. We said, listen, if you allow this to happen, here are all the reasons why biblically this is messy. And we knew it was coming. If you allow this to continue, these people will mock you. They will get more bold in their statements as to why it's a good idea. This also goes back to our discussions with AI, that without the proper biblical worldview or moral compass, you end up exactly in this place. So we covered it in 2023, then again in 2024. And what we said in 2024 is that if you do not stop this now, It will be in the United States sooner than you know. And sure enough, Andrew, about 2 months ago, WorldCoin announced that they were launching in 7 cities in the US, with their first launch in the city of San Francisco. Scanning irises to give you cryptocurrency, getting biometrics. Where does that lead to? It says, well, look, we have this information on people. That person looks like a bad actor, or they had a cheeseburger today, but they had one yesterday. Maybe they shouldn't have that. That's not healthy for you. You're an endangered class. You have a propensity for this. That's probably not a good idea. Can you see now how you can go from something that's supposed to be good for you into this kill box where your movement is limited, your ability to make purchasing decisions is limited, your ability to where you live and where you transit to is now limited, under the guise that we know better than you that you need universal basic income. And in order for you to get it, here's what you have to do. And Andrew, here's the topper of the topper on the kill box, is that they normalize the behavior, right? So it becomes normal for you. You were talking about Siri a minute ago. Imagine, using John Lennon's thing, imagine life without it. You get so used to it, right? Because they've normalized it. At first it was scary, but it's like, no, it's kind of my friend. And it's like, oh, that sure is convenient. Then you stop thinking about it. Next thing you know, it's pervasive in every area of your life. Just ask your smart TV, right? Or other smart device that you have in your home that you now can't live without and you feed information to. Once they can normalize these things, Andrew, whether it is clot shots, or bad food, or putting poison in the air, it doesn't matter. Once they normalize the behavior, they put people back to sleep. Welcome to the kill box.
It's hard for people to understand, I think, because, I certainly wouldn't want that kind of power over people. What is but it's just this desire for raw power. I must rule, and I must rule you, which is why they won't kill everybody. They'll kill people in their way, but eventually they'll get down to the people they can rule, and that they'll be satisfied with. But I mean, is that really the ultimate end game? They just want to be God and are going to do whatever they can to achieve that, do you think?
So think about a 10-block radius and think about an invisible electric wire all the way around that 10-block radius where you can't get in and out. And when you're in that 10-block radius, they're controlling your money, they're controlling your food, they're controlling your skies, they're controlling where you live, they control where you work, where you play, right? Who you could do business with. When you're in that kill zone, that kill box, you're stuck. That's called an open air prison. Like all these buildings they're erecting with all these apartments, as far as I'm concerned, those are family-sized jails.
We know that firms like BlackRock and Vanguard are buying up existing homes and turning them into rentals. In fact, many of the existing home sales are going to investors who are buying them at bargain basement prices right now because interest rates and the cost to close are too prohibitive for most people to get into a home. So the investors are the only ones that have enough money to let the home sit until the market turns around to be able to afford it. But by that time, they're turned into rentals. Then you have, again, the multifamily units being built everywhere. Is this, I mean, maybe it's not a part of the plan, but it's certainly something that these 15-minute city folks are going to use to their advantage if the tide turns just so. Am I off base here in at least being concerned about that possibility?
Not at all, Andrew. With Juliana's example of the kill box, I would equate it to, it's worse than you taking the poison, going and killing all your friends. They want it to be more like the Roach Motel. So they want you to get a taste, go get your friends, bring them into the Roach Motel, because you may remember the old slogan from the commercial, roaches check in, but they don't check out, right? That is the reality. And these people do have a Messiah complex, right? And so they don't just want to kill. They want to get these people together, drain as much out of them as they possibly can, whether it is time, energy, effort, organs, anything they can get. They want to suck as much as possible, resource-wise, out of you before they eliminate you, and then whittle down to the people that they can control. That is the serf class. Because the people who are doing this do not see you as people. And when I say you, I'm talking to the audience and I'm talking about us. They do not see us as human. And Andrew, when we teach on this and we speak on this, we have to set people straight right off the bat. You have to understand that they don't see an issue with this because they look at you as chattel. Okay. They want a renter's nation because land ownership or home ownership, why was it so important in the framing of the United States? Because that ownership gives you control, power, and a vested interest. If you take that away, people no longer have a vested interest in necessarily what happens around them. And then you end up with a nation of renters. It becomes easier in a 15-minute city. There's plenty of room for it. And guess what? It normalizes that for generations, much like the last 100 years of education have been stolen from us, where we're now taught to test versus taught to think by design. Now you're in a place where the normalization of living in a Cracker Jack box where you're told to live, work, and play in a particular place, and you don't really need to go these other places, becomes normal. People no longer do it. Next thing you know, you have your open air prison, your 15-minute city, and now you're a slave. And you don't even realize it happened.
Well, no wonder we have inflationary economic policies, and we're working hard to make our dollar as useless as possible. I'm sure that all goes hand in hand, but what do I know? Hey, well, we've talked about the tech. Now we're going to get into the tactics. Stay tuned. In the next segment, what are the tactics being used? How are they taking this tech, co-opting it all, co-opting our language, changing definitions in order to accomplish their goal of an America-less world? That is next on Culture Crossroads.
Let the Jousting Lemur Wine Bar and Restaurant take you on a tour of the best vineyards without leaving downtown Bismarck. Sample wines from around the world, find new favorites, discover perfect pairings, and learn from a certified sommelier. Join our wine club and really take your wine knowledge up a notch. Wine may be our specialty, but you'll also find fresh beer, outstanding food, and the perfect atmosphere to host your next special event. Find the Jousting Lemur on Main in Bismarck.
And welcome back to Culture Crossroads. R.C. Williams, Julianna, Ormond, sticking with us here, and thank you for sticking with us as well. We're going to get into now how the narratives are hijacked by those who want to bring down America. How they twist movements, they take slogans, they change definitions. And let me just run down a couple. These are some of the talking points. And I'll rifle through these really quick, and you can expand on them in detail if you like. But for instance, the No Kings movement, that was hijacked by the left. And of course, that's very top of mind right now. No kings, no kings. Our founding principles are rebranded. And it is interesting too, along with that, the idea of whiteness, everything is racist, and whiteness is inherently bad. And if it has whiteness to it, it's no good. For example, we know that test scores apparently in school are if you do well in school, that's a product of whiteness, and it's not good. So we need to lower the standards for everybody. Now, there's a whole lot more wrong with that, but you get the idea. Language replacement, the republic, democracy, liberty, all these things now mean different things than what was originally established. And again, it begs the question, well, who are changing these definitions? Who are the ones that are changing the definitions? And why isn't anyone stepping up and calling their bluff at a time early enough in the process where it can be turned around? And it seems like we always wait until it's already baked into culture before we start hemming and hawing about it. But what is the hijacking the narrative piece? How are they doing this really kind of, propaganda style?
Well, let's just talk about the no kings thing. Actually, before I start there, I want to talk about the word defending democracy. We are not a democracy. I'm offended every time somebody says we're a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, and there is such a big difference between the two of them. So we've got the no kings movement happening, right? And everybody's out there talking about having no kings. What's democracy? What happens in the end? Tyranny happens in the end. A king happens in the end. The one with the most might is the one that winds up winning. So you're out there talking about wearing a flag now, and they're taking over the narrative. They're wearing flag-looking types of shirts saying, oh, we're all American. And I'm sitting here going, no, you're out there actually acting like a buffoon. But number two, you're sitting there and you're talking about things that are so anti the core, the essence, the culture of who America is. right? You're talking about democracy, but it's like, you know what? If our founding fathers were alive, they would look at you and go, you have no idea what you're talking about. We are not a democracy. We gave you a constitutional republic for a reason. Why are you out there protesting the way that you are, making a buffoonery of yourselves?
Mm-hmm. Andrew, I am amazed. Like, Julianna did such a good job of expressing this. Isn't it amazing? And I've had this conversation with conservatives. Now, Christian conservatives that watch this show, what I'm about to say may offend you. And that's okay, because the first step is acceptance in solving any problem. You have to understand what just happened to you here. If you are a freedom-loving American who works hard and does what they're supposed to do, you have the American flag, you go to rallies, you support everything. Let me explain what just happened to you with No Kings. They basically took the idea of the Revolutionary War, the fight for independence, right? The founding framework of the United States, and said, that's ours. So we're going to take that, dress up like patriots and say, it's like we're fighting the British again. No kings. King Trump is like King George, right? So they took all the work you've done over the last couple of years and your patriotism, they snatched it from you.
Yep.
Right? They got you so angry that they distracted you from the fact that they were going to use this stuff against you. Many people didn't see it coming. It was very strange. It's also strange that there were middle-aged white liberals that were the majority of those people, but that's another story. So when Julianna got to the part about democracy, it's very interesting that they set up this patriotic scene and then they sprinkle in the word democracy. Democracy, we've got to defend our democracy. And as Julianna said, we're not a democracy. But do you understand what's going on here? They've normalized it. They've normalized the word. And here's what gets us, Andrew, and this is like hijacking the narrative, and where we start to ask the question, are people ignorant or are they complicit? Why is it that every time this happens, they use the word democracy or our democracy or we're a democracy, that people who know better don't correct them right away and say, we are not a democracy, sir, ma'am, they, them, theirs, whatever. We are a constitutional republic. Why not?
Well, but you know, so whenever I hear that, though, democracy, and then someone will shout back, you know, we're not a democracy. But we don't educate people as to what a democracy is versus a constitutional republic. Right. So people are arguing, they're just arguing the slogans back and forth. No, you're not. Yes, I am. You know, it's like that old novelty song, like the Rosie the Riveter song, I can do anything better than you can't. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Yes, I can. This is pretty much where we have devolved, to use a term loosely, as a culture, particularly politically. And people don't realize that democracy it's majority rule, it's mob rule, and whoever's got the strongest mob and the loudest voice that can and whoever ends up counting the votes is the one who wins. Okay, right. So this has nothing to do with representing anybody, nothing to do with we the people. It has everything to do with me, the all-powerful. And we forget that, because democracy is marketed as we the people, as if somehow a constitutional republic broke democracy. It did not. The constitutional republic preserved your ability to speak into matters of national affairs and national leadership, and to be able to fire your leaders without having to fire a shot. If we want to sell that down the river and go to democracy, you're going to end up first with the corporatocracy that we talked about on this show that's creeping into our culture, because our leaders who have that power are in deep with the big corporations, because we have institutional capture in this country. And that is not going to be something that will afford freedom to anyone, because corporations want to make money and box out all competition. So, you know, it just goes on and on and on. We talked about co-opted protests, as you mentioned. I heard this recently. Tell me if you think this is a part of this. We've talked about on the program how, and particularly during the election cycle last fall, we that are conservatives really don't have any representation anymore, or very little, in DC. All of culture and politics has gone so far left that the progressives are way off. And the Democrats who used to be Democrats 10 years ago are now on the Republican side. So Republicans, I think the party is probably functioning as it's supposed to, because it's mostly Democrats of old. And it's not conservatives anymore. We're not getting there. And I don't know how long this coalition lasts or what it means, or does that mean the far left, we can defeat the far left and then go back to the whole, I want to go to the same place, but we differ in terms of degree of action and things like that. But it makes it real easy to hijack the narrative because you have the radical progressives who will say and do anything. Their version of protest is burn everything down. And they don't play by our rules. So it does make it easy for them because it gives them an entire party apparatus with which to operate and use. What say you?
So the most important thing that you said out of all of that, it summarizes everything that you said, is this is about marketing. It's marketing. You know, there was millions and millions and millions of dollars that went behind that protest. They needed to market. Right? Even the parade that Trump did, Palantir and Oracle were two of the companies that paid for the parade. Why did they do that? Well, they needed to market to the American people that Oracle and Palantir were good people. They're doing the parade for America so we can see. And it's like, this is all marketing. It's all propaganda. You know, it's all theatrics. Everything that we're looking at is theatrics. It's like, we're going to put on a play for you so that you can believe that we're doing this thing over here. But in reality, behind closed doors, we're having conversations and we're doing X, Y, and Z for LMNOP reasons. And the American people don't need to know what's happening. And we're not understanding. We're not waking up to the theatrics.
We even saw it with RFK Jr. and the FDA and HHS coming out and changing the recommendations on the jab. But the way they said, well, we're not going to recommend it for healthy people anymore, except all the risk factors that they listed pretty much includes everybody, no matter if you're healthy or not. And, you know, I mean, your doctor would probably give you a clean bill of health, even with some of those quote unquote risk factors. So it was like a non-recommendation. Maybe it's a step in the right direction. I don't know, but it was marketing. It was, hey, we're going to show you we're pulling back on this, but really we're not. You know, and I have to think it's got to be because the money changers back there are controlling things, whether or not RFK has good intentions or not, I don't know. But that, though, serves the other side, and this is the last thing we'll talk about in the segment here, by creating anger and then redirecting that anger, which I think is really what we see across the board. It's why we hate the news, because it just makes you mad. And we've been joking about that for decades, but now we can see why. We get mad, we get all emotional, and we just respond. And now we are encouraging particularly violent responses coming from the left, by the way, and not holding them accountable or any consequence for that. And this is becoming, we're being conditioned that this should be normal. And you got to wonder, you bring that out to its logical conclusion when those protesters start burning down people's homes and not their cars, when they start breaking the windows of your living room and not your storefront. Right. What happens then? I want to avoid where we are now, but I certainly want to avoid where that ends up, because now we're in the streets. Now we're getting to zero-sum game, and it's because we're just blinded by this anger that they're ginning up in many of us.
But anger gets you to move. And that's exactly what they're looking to get the American people to do. They need to get you to go in a certain direction, to go into that kill box, for example, so that you make the moves that they want you to make. You know, the reason why RC and I started Ripped from the Headlines, our publication, is literally to talk about the different headlines, the propaganda of what they're putting out there in the news and saying, you know what, this is baloney, this is true, this is what you need to know that's going behind this headline over here, because they want you to believe a certain something. And we're like, you know what, we see the narrative control, we see the propaganda, we see how they're trying to push people to believe a certain way, to do a certain action. And we were like, we need to start telling people what's really happening, not what they're telling us that's happening.
And that is a part of what this show, and I know your work, tries to do, the work we do together. We want to motivate people to the positive. And yes, we talk about negative things. We want to motivate people with truth and with God's word. And that here's a positive thing we can do in whatever way we can in our communities. And speaking of that positive thing, what is the way out? Well, we're going to get to that right after the break. We're going to talk about two things. One, all this that we've talked about, the tech, the tactics, all serve to produce an infrastructure. What infrastructure is that? What is being created that they want to capture us all? And then what is the way out? That is next in Culture Crossroads.
West River Equipment of Mandan is here to help you maintain peak productivity in your operation. As an authorized dealer for many high-quality equipment lines, we have the new and used equipment it takes to make your farming, ranching, or construction operation profitable and efficient. West River Equipment also has the parts on hand and the experienced technicians in our shop to get your equipment back in action fast. Find what you need at West River Equipment on Old Red Trail in Mandan.
And welcome back one more time to Culture Crossroads. We had our faith focus segment really at the top of the show, and so what we're going to do now, we want to tell you what the infrastructure being created is for all this madness. Where does the control population, where does the tyranny over population go, and what is the way out? R.C. Williams, Julianna, Ormond, of course, joining us here as well. Here are some of the main talking points, and you've heard us talk about these. You probably have heard other conservative talkers, conservative podcasters, hosts talk about these things. And while they are talking points, they do carry weight, they do matter. Let me go through them really quick. First of all, Vision Zero, and we've heard about this, probably aligned with Agenda 2030. That was big about a year and a half ago. It's still going on. World Economic Forum, the departed Klaus Schwab, and Yuval Noah Harari and useless eaters. Well, Vision Zero in a city looks like, we're not driving around in our cars anymore, and they're going to sell it to us for convenience, right? Fewer accidents, fewer issues, but really it's a surveillance city. And I've mentioned this before with car insurance. What we're seeing now, car insurance is actively giving you a low jack to monitor how hard you press on your brake pedal in exchange for a discount on your monthly premium. So this is already here, and that is not tracking, that is triangulation, that is behavior modification through technology to incentivize you to behave a certain way, to drive a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. Altamont Springs, I know we've talked about that a little bit on the show in Florida. This is a smart city test case, and we're going to talk about the smart city infrastructure because that is really the infrastructure being built. 15-minute cities, as Julianna mentioned in previous segments here on this program, that is an infrastructure for movement control. A 15-minute city seems like convenience, but they want to control where you move, where you work, how often you go out, what you buy at the store, how far you travel to work, so on and so forth. They're not preparing for accidents. They're preparing for behavior regulation. I would add behavior modification to that. And triangulation, as we've talked about, really is about shaping your behavior before you have a chance to resist it. So before you are able to even think about it, they want to shape your behavior up front. All right, RC, Julianna, break that down for us.
Boy, where do we start? So I think the idea of Altamont Springs being a test city for so many things, testing wastewater for COVID. Altamont Springs, Florida was the pilot city for what you deal with in the country now with that testing. Autonomous rides. Altamont Springs, Florida, small suburb, northwest Orlando, leads the country in the number of autonomous rides, especially around the mall. They've got all these little buses that are self-driving. They did 150,000 of those rides in 2024. Their goal for 2025 is 500,000. Okay, in the city.
I'm sorry, I don't lose your thought, but I have to interject this here. Why is it that we can now get into cars that drive themselves, but I'm not allowed to hold my cell phone? That's stupid. I just think we should say it. I mean, at least I'm a person in the driver's seat, but all of a sudden I can have no one driving and no one is preferable to me on my phone or eating some French fries. Give me a break. All right, I'm done. Continue.
But you're not smart enough. That's the reason why you can't do that.
Tracking, triangulation. Andrew, but yeah, when you continue that logic, right? So obviously Altamont Springs and really Florida, they're a poster child for the logic of 15-minute cities. Now, there had been some fear around that, and I use that with quotes. So they're like, wow, that's going to be a hard pill for people to swallow. But the idea of Vision Zero, let's reduce traffic accidents to zero, because, traffic is racist. And I'm not saying this jokingly. If you read the materials from the Vision Zero group, they tell you that there is systemic racism in traffic accidents. And that, traffic cameras and all these things shouldn't be in places where there are accidents or crime or anything like that. They should just be everywhere so it's not racist.
You remember the Biden administration, Pete Buttigieg said that the bus system was racist. And
correct, and roads are racist, yes.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that to add credence to what you're saying. Continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Andrew, it's pretty easy, Leap, to get there. And you don't realize, when we did our long form piece, on Vision Zero cities and what they lead to, how pervasive this is. Most of the state of Florida is already Vision Zero. Most of the counties have already signed on to this. And what we discovered in Altamont Springs is that the city council unanimously voted yes on Altamont Springs being a Vision Zero city. And we had a city council person tell us face to face, we looked at him and said, how in the world could you vote for this? And I have to give Julianna credit. She was very Brooklyn in her response. She gave him the Johnson treatment. Lyndon Johnson would hem somebody up in a corner and give him a talking to, right? She said, how in the world could you do this? And he says, well, it's a good idea. I rode my bike here. It was 35 minutes to get to the office. So I rode my bike over here. And listen, don't think about owning an auto repair shop or anything that has to do with autos, because by 2040, we're not going to have cars in the city anyway.
And, the other infrastructure that is inherent in that, but is not said explicitly, but if you're in a 15-minute city and you work in a 15-minute city, you are being told what job you work. You're not choosing to follow your dream anymore. You're in whatever tech house or factory or whatever it is, because it's within 15 minutes and you can only get so far and you can only go so far. There are no longer a world of options for you to explore as an individual. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're totally correct.
You're totally correct, Andrew. So here's where this gets dangerous, right? If it wasn't dangerous enough already. What is the price of local inaction? Well, Andrew, if you looked at our piece on the problems with the big, beautiful bill, in particular, a moratorium on states passing laws regarding AI for the next 10 years, Andrew, the only way that happens is if you have enough inaction locally that legislators believe it's a good idea to slam something so important into a bill that also includes retaining the tax cuts. Somebody thought it was just okay for the feds to say, listen, states, you can't make any AI regulation for 10 years because we're going to do it all. Andrew, anytime anything like this gets left to the feds, that shows an ineptitude and inaction at every level leading up to the federal government that they can't get it done. Now, obviously, this is a violation of the 10th Amendment. This is a states' rights issue, and this thing is either got to get neutered or get thrown out, or it's just going to get ignored by the states, right? The states are just going to be like, whatever, because there's already AI legislation in place, in particular in Florida, and other states have taken this on as well. What's going to happen with that? A whole lot of nothing, right? I think you're going to see some folks ignore it. That said, though, Andrew, this is the cost. How did they get us to a Vision Zero city? Because of inaction, because of not paying attention, because of not being vigilant. How did these things happen in my state, where even in the state of Florida today, they can still pull you out of your house and inject you with something if it's deemed an emergency? In the free state of Florida, Andrew, how does that happen? Inaction, not paying attention, lack of vigilance. How do you end up with this moratorium in the big, beautiful bill? Same thing. How do you end up with a 15-minute city? Well, you let developers come in and say, we're just going to use this land and build up because we need housing. We need housing. We need housing. People can't afford to live. We got to give them housing so they can come here because they're coming in droves. Yet they don't tell you what the cost is. And I mean the actual cost of having that type of housing just show up in neighborhoods all over the place.
In our last couple of minutes here, what's the way forward? What's the way out? What is our blueprint for victory?
So Andrew, let me share this. If we don't act, where does it end up? When Rip from the Headlines started, we covered the case of Randall Crater and My Big Coin. Here's a guy who built technology that the government didn't particularly care for because they hate competition. And when he refused to step down because he wasn't guilty of anything, they bankrupted him and put him in prison for 8 years. The cost of inaction could very well be your livelihood and your life. You may rot away in prison, as Mr. Crater is. So how do we win that battle? Andrew, the good news is that through the process of developing Sherlock, our research and behavioral marketing business, we are the Watchman Weekly, ripped from the headlines, and eventually Watchman Action is we came up with the blueprint to fight this. Like, realistically speaking, if we don't get our story together, we're not going to win in the court of public opinion. We've got to be able to convey these messages in a way that the masses say, even if they don't agree with us completely, they say that is wrong. Now, that's happening to some degree. Scott and Jill Kiley in Southwest Florida have done a wonderful job with getting fluoride out of the water. That's not a partisan issue. That's a life issue. Right. And even when the most radical progressives figure it out, you know what they do? They vote against it. So we know it can be done, right? So you got to get your story right. Then you've got to organize and mobilize your people. You've got to get the best people doing the things that they do best. Some people are out there, they're forefront, they're great talkers, great. Some people are behind the scenes. They're great at coordinating people, making sure all the trains run on time, right? Some people are the ones that handle all of the follow-up. Some people are the ones that coordinate the coordinating, so to speak, to make sure everybody and everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. You've got to get those things down, and you've got to know how to get to the decision makers so you cut through the clutter, because that clutter's in place on purpose. And then finally, you got to be able to measure how you're doing. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. How do you know if you're successful, and what tools should you use? We've actually tackled all of those, Andrew, in a meaningful way. And that's a big part. But the big win for us that we've been told by people when we train is that in 4 hours or less, we can have any individual or group ready to tackle the core issues that matter to them most in a meaningful way. We see these poster childs with what Scott and Jill are doing with fluoride. The Reclaim Florida campaign is actually a walking, talking poster child of Watchman Action in what they're doing with local and state government and the legislature. Andrew, this is the way forward. But in a self-governing society, you're in the chapter of the book where the self-governing part is important. That's you.
And that self-governing means we can't wave a magic wand and have this happen. It also means we are not going to usurp your rights and force you to do it. Right. So we're asking you to join in this. We're asking you to join in this, and we're giving you the best tools that we can. Let everybody know where they can find your material and even get in contact with you. Maybe they want to bring you out to their council or to their civic group, or their church group. Where can people go?
Andrew, so Have Bag Will Travel is our theme. We want to train and help as many people as we can. If they go to Watchmen, so it's plural, watchmanaction.org, you can see the story, you can see a sample of the training. We'd love to talk with you. It's easy to send us a message there. If you're interested in the training and you want us to come and see you, you can drop a message to us that way too. We love to get those, and we'll always figure out a way. If you and your group are serious, we will work out a way to get to you that makes sense for you so we can get this information out. Because, Andrew, once we equip a group, then they're enabled to equip other groups.
That's right.
We can continue to grow. So yeah, watchmanaction.org.
Watchmanaction.org is the website. Watchman, plural, MEN, watchmanaction.org. And of course, you can let us know your thoughts about our thoughts by emailing the show directly at sodomediaco@gmail.com, sodomediaco@gmail.com. You can also find archived episodes, other goodies at sodomediaproductions.com, sodomediaproductions.com. And if you are not able to tune in to our regular broadcast on Beck TV, Sundays, 6 p.m. Central Time, you can also find us on BeckTV.plus, and just search Culture Crossroads there. You can find us on demand. Never miss an episode. You can share it with your friends, all that good stuff. And of course, we're available wherever you get your podcasts. For R.C. Williams and Julianna, Ormond, I'm Andrew Southwick. Thank you for being with us on this episode of Culture Crossroads. Remember, it's the truth that sets us free, and the truth will keep us free. Until next time, so long, John 1:5.
Let's be frank, it's a pain to be without your vehicle after an accident. That's why you should take it to Jerome's Collision Center. Our shop is supersized, and we have the qualified staff to fill it up and work on your vehicle, step by step, piece by piece, in crazy fast time without sacrificing quality. When you need us, we'll turn your bad experience into a good one. We're Jerome's Collision Center, and we're the best at what we do.
Ryan Rust is where you can find truly unique clothing, accessories, and decor. Our hand-picked selections make for memorable gifts for others and distinctive pieces for yourself, including custom tees pressed in minutes. Find Ryan Rust on the east edge of Mandan's Main Street.